and kind of decide what direction you want to go in.
Right?
Me? I'm using fours.
All right, so tonight we're tying, this is a fly that we used to use when I lived in Oregon, on the Oregon coast, for sea run cutthroat. Worked for just about anything that came in the bays, but we'd fish it in the bays either from the bank or out of a boat. It's called a reverse spider or reverse hackle pattern. It basically uses real soft hackle over the eye of the hook. So it's not going back along the hook, it's actually going out over the eye of the hook. And so traditionally it used mallard flank, dyed colors. You can use really just about any hackle. I've experimented with all kinds. So there's bags of mallard flank on the table, an olive and a white. Traditionally it was just a standard white mallard flank. I'm going to pass this around as I'm talking. The real simple ones are what we're going to do tonight. You can see all the different variations. The pattern allows for all kinds of variations. Tonight we're doing very simple. We're not weighting it or anything. You can add any kind of weight to it like you would any other pattern anywhere you want. Whether you want the hook to ride up or down, you want to put eyes on it, whether you want to weight the body along the body with some wire, or whether you want to put barbell eyes on it, whatever you want to do is basically up to you. I'll pass this around. This is just some of the variations that I use and play with. You guys can take a look, and then you'll get an idea kind of what we're dealing with. So yeah, we use this for sea run cuts, steelhead. It's a very simple pattern. It basically will work for anything that chases prey. It's not something, it's an action fly. It's not something you're just going to throw out there, let it sit on the bottom and just kind of bounce it a little bit on the bottom. Those hackles going out over the eye like this, you're going to, short little strips work best, and what happens is those hackles just really open up and move around. So it gives this kind of erratic, fleeting motion or swimming motion. You can play with any kind of colors you want with it, and so anything that's going to chase bait is going to use this fly. I've used this fly for bass, for everything, freshwater, saltwater, whatever, and it's just a matter of changing it to the way that you want it to look with it. So we'll go ahead and get started. Size of hook is really just a matter of what you want to imitate with it, whether it's a shrimp or a minnow. Little smaller. I mean, I've never gone up to, like, 1/0, 2/0 hooks. Generally in the 4-2 range in there. So you're going to start with a thread base. Just start behind the eye of the hook, and you're going to wrap a thread base all the way down the shank of the hook. These are best on a little longer shanked hook, maybe a 2X hook. I like to use a nice heavy hook just for my weight. And you're going to wrap back just to where the bend begins. Trim off your excess. And then I like to make just a little ball of thread right at the very back end. That's just going to help hold the next step on. So then we're going to leave our thread just sitting on the bend of the hook there. Each fly is going to take 2 mallard flanks. Well, use up 2. So I've got 2 different mallard flanks here. I'm going to use one. I'm just going to use for the tail fibers. All right, so I'm just going to pull that fluff down, and you're going to pull off a 1/2 inch or so of mallard flank fibers.
Yeah, hold it down just a little.
Yep. Get the tips even as you can. They don't have to be perfect. And what I like to do is, once I get those tips evened up, I spin it in my fingers. That way it kind of gets them all going different directions. They're not all clumped up in one bundle like this. So you're going to spin it in your fingers. You're just going to tie that off the end like a tail. I go about the shank, length of the shank for that. So we're going to tie that in first. All right, you're going to tie it just a little bit behind that, or in front of that ball of thread that we put on there, and that way it keeps anything from slipping off. It just really cinches it on there. I like to wrap up and just wrap all the butt ends down. The trick with this fly is really to not let things bundle up, but keep it nice and even along the shank. So now you're here, you've got the tail on. You have a lot of options here before you move into the next main step. Here's a place where I like to add, you'll see some of those flies. I like to add maybe some dumbbell eyes on there. You can add shrimp eyes on there, whatever you want right now at the end of the tail. I also like to add a little bit of, if I'm doing a shrimp, I like to add a little bit of flash. So I've got flash along the table. You can use any kind of flash you want. I really like the, for the shrimp, the flash blend, the SF flash blend. And so you just pull a little bit, and just use a little bit. You don't need much at all. You don't want to overdo it. We're not tying a woolly bugger. And I like to make that just a little bit longer than my tail. Whatever flash, you know, if you're going to use a little crystal flash, you know, 2 to 4 strands, not a lot. You're going to tie that right on top of the tail, right in front of it there. Tie that down. And again, I like to just work open wraps up the shank of the hook. Just tying that down, keeping the shank of my hook, the body of the fly, nice and even along the whole.
Don't pay the ransom, I'll escape.
So now I'm going to go back again, and now I'm back at the tail. So I've just tied the 2 items on at the tail, right? A little bit of mallard flank and then a little bit of flash. And now we're going to tie in some chenille. Now you can use the body of this fly whatever you want. You could dub it. You could use chenille. You can use crystal chenille. You can use any kind of wrap that you want to get the effect that you want to make it bulkier, make it thinner, whatever you want. The standard, the original, was just some kind of a regular chenille to it. So we're just going to use, we've got chenille out there, you can use that. There's lots of other stuff in those bins if you think you want to use something different. So I'm going to tie this chenille on there, long end out over the back of the hook. And the butt end of the chenille is going to lay down along the shank of the hook. Just like I've been doing everything, keep it in along the shank of the hook. So everything stays nice and even along the shank of the hook. Wrap up. Don't crowd your eye. Make sure you guys, everybody leaves space right behind the eye of the hook. And you can go back and forth a couple times just to secure that really well. All right. So now I've got the chenille at the back of the fly, a little bit of flash, and the mallard flank tail. The chenille's all tied down. I'm going to leave everything there for now. And now we're going to tie in hackle at the front. This is going to be the most difficult part for some of you guys if you haven't worked with hackle a lot. So I'm going to prepare, I've got a fresh mallard flank. I'm going to prepare it by stripping off all the fluff at the bottom of the stem. I'm going to strip off all that fluff. And now what I want to do is we're actually going to not tie it in at the stem here. We're going to tie it in towards the tip of the feather. So I'm just going to hold a little bit the top of the feather like this, and I'm just going to run my thumb and forefinger down and pull a lot of that hackle down like that. Can you guys see that from here at all? Right? So you see how I did that? Okay? So now we're going to tie it in. We're actually going to tie it in right up here. Okay? We're going to tie it in up here. What I want to do is when I tie it in, the orientation is important. All right, I want to tie it in so the natural curve of the feather is going down, not up. Okay, so it's going to be tied in like that. You can see that the natural curve of the feather is down, not up like this. So I'm going to tie it in at that spot right above the eye of the hook. Okay, right below the eye of the hook. And so you can see, I don't know if you can see way in the back, but that mallard, the natural shape is going down. Okay?
Oh, you're tying the tip towards the bend.
Yeah, the tip is facing the bend of the hook, correct. Okay? Now what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this hackle around the front of the fly. The best way to do this, and I don't know if you guys will be able to see it way back there, but it's on the fly now so I can't lift it up. You're going to push that hackle up at a 90-degree angle like this, and then you're going to, using your fingers, you're going to pull those forward like that. Okay? Can you guys see that? I'm just stroking all those fibers so they're all going to one side of the stem. Together like that. Now this hackle in the front can be messy, so it's not, you don't have to get really worried about it. But basically I've just pushed those all so they're going one direction. That just makes it easier to wrap. And so now we're just going to start wrapping this around the eye of the hook, keeping, you might have to just kind of use your fingers, and one wrap behind the other. And we're going to wrap it back. And you can use up the whole feather. We're just going to keep wrapping it back. Once you used up the whole feather, just keep a hold of the stem directly up, and you're just going to come in with your thread and tie that stem down. Okay, if you get a few. And then you can trim off all the excess. So now you can see how that hackle is just kind of a mess, but it's facing out this way. It's not facing back like you would see on most flies.
To tie off the stem.
And now you're just about done. All we've got to do is bring our thread back up right behind the hackle there, the mallard. And then we're going to take our chenille and nice and tight. We're just going to wrap that forward. Now you could add a rib on this. You could do like dubbing and put a ribbing on it if you like a ribbing on your flies. Make sure you leave room behind the eye of the hook when you're wrapping your chenille, that you don't get too far up. You can use this chenille really slightly, right up snug so that it almost pushes those mallard feathers forward a little bit, right? It just kind of sets them in there. And then you tie off that chenille behind the mallard feather. A few wraps. Trim off the excess. And now, to tie it off, all you've got to do is thumb and forefinger come in, pull all those hackle feather, mallard feathers back, pull your thread through the feather, and then you just tie off a nice little head right behind the eye of the hook. Do your half hitch or whip finish. This is why it's nice to learn the whip finish with your fingers. There you go, and tied it off. And that's all there is to it. It's a real simple fly. I spent time on the hackle. It's not too difficult once you get the feel for it. And so that's basically the finished fly. Like I said, it leaves so many options for weighting.